Okay, so now we're going to create a splash screen view, which will actually test our view model, our proverb view model. So let's create a new view, and let's call this splash screen view. Okay, great. And I'm going to want a binding is presented, because this splash screen might be presented and it might not be presented. And since we have a binding, we're going to have some kind of argument over here. So Control Option Command F, and since it's a binding, let's do constant true. And instead of hello world, let's temporarily just write splash screen view. Okay, great. Next, I'm going to create another view that I'm going to call container view, which will transfer from the splash screen view to the main view. So let's call this container view. And this view is going to be quite simple. So let's create a state variable, and is presented, or better yet, is splash screen presented, and we're going to say true because we want to start with the splash screen. So if is splash screen presented, then let's call splash screen $. And honestly, I don't like this name. Let's just call this, I don't like the name. I'm going to call this splash screen is presented. I like that better. I could have used code refactorization and rename, but it just felt quicker. And otherwise use the main view. Okay, so we start out with the splash screen. The splash screen has a binding. So hopefully the splash screen is going to do something, and at some point convert splash screen is presented to false, and then we'll just move on to our game. Okay? So let's go to the splash screen view. And I actually would like to import an image. So let's Google Undraw. This is a really cool site to be acquainted with. So we have all these illustrations. So browse now. And I'm going to search up here. It's a little bit confusing to find the search bar. And I'm going to search for friendship. Friend. Okay, friendship. And I like this image, so I'm going to click on it. Oh, no. But I want to change the color. Okay? We can choose all kinds of colors, red, whatever. This cool green. And I'm just going to use this red over here. And download SVG, download PNG. I'm going to download the PNG file. And I'm actually going to rename it to just friend. And let's go back to Xcode, to our assets folder. And I'm going to drag in from my downloads folder into the assets folder. My downloads folder is on my secondary screen. Okay, great. And now let's go back to the splash screen view. And let's get to work. Okay, so amazing. Now I'm going to introduce a bunch of private state variables. So I'm going to have some opacity value set to 0.0. It's important that 0.0 and not just 0. Next, I'm going to have a scale. So we're going to initially scale with a width of 0.5, 0.5. I wonder what we're going to scale. Well, we're going to be scaling some quote. Next, I'd like our quote to move up. Now we could move it up by using an offset value, but actually all I'm going to do in order to move our quote up to the top of the screen, like animated, is by adding a spacer. So if move up is true, we're going to add a spacer at a very specific point. Next, I'd like to have an angle, and I'm just showing you this just to show you how we can animate very easily, but on the other hand, we don't want to overdo it. I think our result in the end will look nice, but you know, just showing off and doing every animation possible is not always the best decision. So you'll be able to decide if you like our animation, and it's better if you change it, if you change the splash screen and turn it into something more interesting. So we're going to have spacing between 3 lines of code: the Chinese, the pinyin, and the English translation. Okay? And finally, I want access to our proverb view model. Oh, I had a typo? Yeah. Proverb view model. Excellent. So now let's get to work. So first of all, let's create a Z-stack. And I want a background color of black. Ignore safe area. Okay, great. Next, I want an image. I'm going to use China 1. And if the image didn't appear, that means we have a typo somewhere, or we don't have the image file. Like if I capitalize China now, it's just not going to work. And let's set this to resizable, .scaled to fill, .ignore safe area, and opacity set to opacity, which is 0. I'm going to click this way down at the bottom of the screen on the right. We have this little arrow. In other words, to leave play mode. And look at these. It's a little bit hard to see, but these blue lines, it turns out that the image is pushing everything out. Like the frame is beyond the size of the phone. And this is not good. This will cause problems when we add our text to the view. So I'm going to embed the Z-stack into a geometry reader in order to get the geometry of our view, to get access to it. And honestly, I usually try to avoid using geometry reader if I can, but in this case, I don't immediately see how to do that. So now we change the frame to 100 by 100. Of the image, right? If we want to see this, I can temporarily remove the black color, or actually, let's remove the opacity for a moment. So now we see our image, but I don't want 100 by 100. I want the geometry size.width by the geometry size.height, and the alignment by default is centered. Okay, so this already looks decent. This looks decent. And now we can undo that, and let's go back to play mode at the bottom of the screen in the preview, a little bit on the left, pressing the play button. Okay, so this doesn't look like much, but it will look like something nice. Okay, so next we have a VStack. I'm going to create a VStack. And let's actually create another VStack with some lines of text. Okay, I'm going to use our spacing. And let's do text. For now, let's just call this line 1. And let's give this a foreground style of .red. Line 2, a foreground style of .yellow. And line 3, again red. And I did text spacing. Of course, that's silly. VStack spacing. Okay, great. So let's just make this line 1, line 2, line 3 look a little bit nicer. And I could refactor this into a different view, and it might even be wise to do that. So let's add a little padding. And now let's add a background. And within that background, I would like a rounded rectangle with corner radius 25. And I experimented quite a bit to get to these results. I actually really had fun doing it. And I want to use a linear gradient with two colors, a black color and a gray color, starting from top, trailing to bottom, top ending actually, top. Leading to bottom trailing. Okay. And next, let's add an opacity of opacity. Okay, so that's gone. Now we're going to be animating this quite soon, so it'll reappear. And now let's add a font of dot title. Okay, great. And a font weight of dot semi-bold. And I'm going to use multi-line text alignment just in case the code is too long. And let's make it centered. Usually it's leading by default. And I'm going to add some more padding. And now apply the scale effect using our scale, which was at 50%, so that's smaller. And next, let's add a rotation 3D effect using angle with degrees angle. And I'm going to go about the x-axis. So 1. And the y, I want that to be 0, so it's like tilted. And at this point, it is already beyond my ability to keep track of the code. The braces, it's just very confusing. So we should refactor this inner VStack. Now this lecture is also getting quite long and we do have quite a lot left to do. So let's take a quick break. So have an amazing day and see you next time.